You know what? I think we should start. I think we should start. So you'll notice I'm the only one here today. And I think that's a good thing. And so it's funny is that on some of these videos, when I've got Mike, or last week we had Jeff Jones, or I have my dad on here, we're not always on the same page. And some of you pick up on that more than others. But one of the things that we really weren't on the same page about was special assessments. Special assessments they're tricky. I wrote a whole article about it last weekend. So if you're not getting the articles, please reach out to me and I'll add you to our MailChimp subscribe list. But basically, special assessments are the thing that really we were not on the same page. And maybe I shouldn't have done the video on it without kind of really going through it with all my co-hosts first. But that's why I wanted to do these things, because I want everyone to have their own opinion. So we spend a lot of time after the video verifying what the rules are and how it's read and all of that. So a couple of things. I think, and this is going to get me a lot of friends, especially here in Naples, the FAR contract is far superior when it comes to special assessments over NABOR. It's so much cleaner. It basically says that the seller's going to pay for it unless they disclose it or make it the buyer's obligation, and that includes any pending assessments that were in the meeting minutes for the last 12 months. So if 6 months ago, they talked about possibly doing a special assessment for the roof. The seller's on the hook for that if that actually comes to fruition. That would be a pending special assessment. NABOR doesn't really give that clear of a definition. It says just broadly, if it is a pending assessment, the seller, is responsible unless it's disclosed. And that was really, really tricky for us to get on the same page about because how do you disclose it? And what is a pending assessment? They don't really define it. Basically, they say a pending assessment is anything that isn't like an actual assessment. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this topic because we did have that previous video on it, and I don't want to bore you. So we're going to section 6. This is the same paragraph, whether you are in the standard or the as-is contract. So association and governmentally imposed liens and special assessments. So seller pays the full amount of any special assessments and governmentally imposed liens, which are known as to the amount and who is paying it. So the identity of the lien or the assessor, the property that's subject to this lien, and the amount. So if we know those things by the time we go under contract, the seller's on the hook, unless it's an installment payment. So if it's they're putting a new golf course together and it's payable over the next 10 years, depending on which one we check, seller or buyer, it could be assumed by the buyer if it's in installments. But if it's paid in advance, then that's going to be a seller obligation. And then it says, if as of the effective date there are any pending liens or special assessments. And this is where we went off the rails. So pending liens or special assessments other than what's specified above, which are not seller's obligation above, and which were not disclosed in writing to the buyer by seller prior to or concurrent with the execution of this contract, and which exceed 1% of the purchase price. Buyer may terminate this contract unless the seller pays the difference over 1%. There's a lot of ifs and then statements in that. So we're going to exclude anything that would have been included in the above section. Everything else, if at the effective date there are any pending liens or special assessments, pending, it's incredibly broad. It might be in the meeting minutes. It could be in a letter that was shared by the board. It could have been brought up at the annual meeting, but not actually in the minutes or on the agenda. It could be just something that's been talked about generally. Hey, maybe we'll do a special assessment and we'll fix the pool. So anything else could technically be a pending assessment, which were not disclosed in writing and which exceed 1%. So let's do a hypothetical. They want to redo that pool. These are $200,000 condos. 1% would be $2,000. So if that pool renovation is going to be greater than $2,000 per unit, then that could fall into the realm of the of this second section, this pending lien, because it's pending. We don't know for sure yet. It's been talked about, loosely, and maybe it's in the meeting minutes, maybe it's not, but it's been talked about. The units are worth 200,000, and this assessment is probably going to be 3,000. So it's over the 1%. So in that scenario, I think the buyer has the right to terminate unless the seller pays up the difference, anything over 1%. Now, this is what's interesting. It says, seller agrees to pay into escrow at closing a reasonable sum to ensure that the excess will be paid. Because this assessment hasn't actually passed. We don't know the amount. We don't know the amount over 1%. But if they're floating the idea of a $3,000 assessment, we know that the 1% was only $2,000. So we're looking at $1,000. We put it in escrow. If it comes through, that money can be used to offset the cost. Now, here's the interesting part. It never gets to this point in my closings. I can't remember the last time a buyer got this upset over something and forced the seller to deal with it as far as an escrow or going over the 1%. It is so rare. And maybe that's why we've never really tested this section. It would have to be, and what drove this topic was we heard about this $200,000 condo that had a $20,000 assessment, and that was pending. They didn't know the amount. They still didn't know the amount, but they got a letter from the board that said, "Hey, we're getting closer. It's probably going to be 24,000." Well, that's pending. That's definitely pending. It was definitely more than 1%. And so the question revolved around, was it disclosed? In the seller disclosure, in the listing, in an email, at the time you went under contract or before, did the listing agent and seller say, "Hey, just so you know, they're thinking of doing a major renovation, and there will likely be an assessment if they decide to do it. It's probably going to be $20,000." If you disclosed it like that, this section doesn't apply because you disclosed it. It would only apply if you didn't disclose it. So now we get to the closing. We get this letter from the board the day of closing, and it's 24,000. It's a 10% of the total purchase price. The buyer is freaked out. What? Oh my gosh, the seller is nervous. The listing agent is nervous. In that scenario, I think the buyer has every right to negotiate out of the deal unless the seller pays the difference, whether it's into escrow or as a credit. So how do we get around this? How do we avoid it? So number one, very, very important that every listing agent have this discussion with the seller. If you don't disclose, it could give the buyer the chance to get out of the deal later. Yes, maybe they negotiate this against us. They beat us up on price a little bit more, but as long as we're avoiding anything over 1%, it's still the best strategy. Disclose it, say, "Hey, this may come up, buyer will assume it later. Just wanted you to know." Now, how do you disclose it? I think you have options. You could put it in the sales contract, put it in other terms and conditions, and say, "Buyer shall assume the pending assessment on the roof or on the pool," whatever. You put it in there. Or what I like even better is put it in the seller disclosure. Because you put in the seller disclosure, you don't really have to remember to disclose it in the contract. You might negotiate 2 or 3 times, and if you forget to put that language in your sales contract, now you're back at square one, and the seller might even blame you for not putting it in the sales contract. So put it in the seller's disclosure. saying buyer shall assume any pending assessments related to the roof. They're expected something in 2026. All right, that's it. Let me know if that's confusing. It's confusing to me. It was confusing to my dad. Um, I didn't actually post that video because I thought it was counterproductive. That if anyone watched it, they'd be like, well, what's the rule? What do we do with this? So now you know that's the rule. And I wrote the article about it, which goes much more into depth, but disclose anything that you think is going to be over 1%. You probably should disclose anything anyways, so that you can avoid having to pay that difference. So the body of this video, what I really wanted to talk about was how do we use the county websites to maximize our information? There is so much good information on the county that I think we're really doing ourselves a disservice not understanding it better. And I will show you a couple of things. So let me see here. I should probably delete my screen and then I'll share it for you guys. So on my web browser, I actually have tons of bookmarks just on county stuff. So it's up here in the corner. I have Collier County Property Appraiser, Collier County Tax Collector, Florida Department of Revenue, permit search for Collier, permits for Naples, permits for Marco Island. I think this is the clerk. It looks like that's Collier County Clerk. Lien auctions, just in case. And then what does or does not require a permit, kind of an interesting topic that I've covered before and probably will cover it again. So really simply, I'm going to give you a good example from this morning. We had a client, I had a realtor call me this morning and said, hey, the seller's really doubting me on how I set up the listing agreement. What do I tell him? How do I convince him that I did this right? And I said, well, let's pull up the deed. That's where it starts. So and the question was, well, how do I do that? So a lot of times we rely very heavily on MLS and CoreLogic and all these, what I call aggregators, these websites that pull information from different sources and give it to you in one place. Sounds like a great idea unless they get it wrong. And I think MLS gets it wrong enough that you should look to the core. You should look to the basics for how to find this stuff on your own. And we're going to look at Collier County, then we'll look at Lee County, and I just have to share my screen again. See if that works. There we go. All right, so collierappraiser.com. This is the appraiser's website. There's a lot of really good information on this website, but where I always start is property search. I haven't seen anyone give me an address in the description yet. If you want to, feel free to. I'm just going to pick a random place. This is not a client of mine, and I apologize to anyone that I'm affecting. Look, this is the HOA, so that actually doesn't help me. We're going to look. Saturnia Lake's a very nice HOA here in town. This is the HOA again. I'm going to search. All right, here we go. We've got a property on Cape Hayes Lane. What you'll notice is we've got our parcel ID up top, we've got our address, and then interestingly, where their mailing address is. So where do the tax bills go? And you could even use this to determine, is this a primary residence? Is it secondary? Is it an investor, LLC? Is it in a trust? You can go it all from this website. And so in this case, it looks like they're sending all their tax bills up to Michigan. And you can also see several things. This is where you can pull your legal description. And then you can also see where they have all your tax stuff. So homestead, I'll give you a quick refresher on this. If it is your primary residence, you get the homestead exemption, and then you get the additional homestead exemption. So it's 25 and 25, so a $50,000 exemption for homestead. And then you get what's called the Save Our Homes exemption. And that is the limitation on how much the value can go up year to year. So the longer you own the property, the more it goes up in value. That goes up fast, and the taxes go up slow. So the difference is called your Save Our Homes. In this case, this is the non-homestead exemption. So even though it's not their primary residence, we're still capping how much the assessments can go up every year. In this case, it's a 10% cap on the non-school tax bills. So that is, this is an interesting one. This would be a secondary home, I'm sure, or an investment property. And then you can see on the left here, we've got all the deeds. So it's got the deed book and page from 1980 all the way to the most recent sale, 2014. And then I'm pretty sure you probably aren't seeing what came up. So let me pull that. So I clicked the link. Collier County is great because it has a direct link to the clerk where the deed is recorded. So in this case, we've got the warranty deed from 2014 when these buyers bought the property. It has all the recording information on the top. So if someone were to be questioning you, or you wanted to make sure that you looked really at the core, the real answer as to how do I set up the owners on this listing agreement? How do I do it when I make my offer? You go to the deed. See how easy that was? I didn't have to log in anywhere. Very, very simple. And in this scenario, we've got to be able to read the deed now. So again, we've got our tax ID number that I just circled. You've got the original sellers are right there, and then the buyers are under that. Let's see, I probably need to stop notating like that. I'm messing all that up. So what you're seeing here is you've got, those are your buyers, and it shows husband and wife. So now I know when the buyers bought it. I know that they took it in their names as husband and wife, and I have their forwarding address. So I have a lot of information on them. I even know where they did the original closing, which is very helpful, or at least that's where the seller was maybe having their deed prepared. Doesn't guarantee that's where the closing was, but it's a good shot. So that's Collier County. As you can see, pretty easy. Actually kind of worked out pretty well. Again, no login information is required, which I love. All right, so I've got another one. Kim's given me an address here. So let me see if I can go back to that. All right, so again, we go to property search. We're going to type in our address. All right, so we've got Richard. They do have it backwards, so they have last name and then first name. It's showing that this is probably his primary because he's showing the site location is the same as his mailing address. And then just to confirm that beyond that, you've got, they're not showing his homestead, so we probably look somewhere else. The trim notice. As a quick update, trim notices are your estimated bill. That's what we expect the bill to be. So interestingly on this one, Kim, even though he's treating it like it's his primary, or at least all the tax bills are going to this address, he does not have his homestead exemption set up. Homesteads are super simple to set up. It's, you have to go down to the county and fill out the paperwork. You address, you have to know your address, you have to get your driver's license, a car registered there if you have one, maybe show a utility bill, but then they'll give you an exemption. Now, what that exemption is worth, it's usually about $400 or $500 right off the top, and then the longer you own the property, the more benefit you'll get. So looks like the taxes did go down from 24 to 25, and that's probably just the value of the property has changed. Maybe it was too high initially. So, Kim says it's a vacant home. So that does explain it. So, if you're going into a listing appointment and you saw all of this, you'd come in pretty prepared. You would know that it's not a homestead. But it would show that all his tax bills are going to the property. So in the very least, you could tell him, hey, why haven't you applied for homestead? Now, Kim says it's a vacant home, so there's your answer. But then you would say, well, why are you having the tax bills sent to the house? Why don't we just update that in the very least? We can have them sent to your other home down the street or up north. I think that would be good advice for someone. And now they see you as a solution person. You're providing a little bit more value in that regard. We'll go to the deed real quick. And so I just clicked one button and now you have the warranty deed. So I've got all of our information. We'll go over this again so that you guys can see what I see. So we know they paid 430,000 for it. Here's the law office that prepared the deed. They may or may not have represented the buyer. Here's our buyer, Richard. I'm not going to try and say his last name. And then we've got an address. We've got our legal description right here. That's our legal description. And that's pretty much it. Pretty straightforward. This is what I would expect for someone that has a deed. We know that at the time he bought it, he was a single person. All the mail is being sent to this same address, and it's not his homestead. Maybe that, begs some more questions. Maybe it helps us come a little bit prepared. So I would print this or I would save it into your folder so that you have it going forward. If your broker asks for a copy or the seller says, "Hey, why did you put this in my personal name?" You say, "Well, here's the latest deed," unless I'm missing something, unless there's a more recent deed, which sometimes there is. The county doesn't always get it right. For the most part, they do a pretty darn good job. I'm going to show you a couple other quick tools that are on this website. So if we click up on the top here, so number one, details. This will tell you when the house was built. So this is 1991 is when they pulled the permit in 1990. They got the CO December 31st of 1990, but they're showing tax year of 91 for some reason. So it looks like the house was probably built in 1990. We look at the tax roll, it'll tell you what they're being charged for. So you could look at, is it part of a CDD? Is it an MTSU? What are the taxes for the school? What are the taxes for conservation? So the school stuff, that that does not come down with the non-homesteaded exemption. That's the big difference when it's a primary home versus a secondary home. We have some aerial. So this is a really cool feature. If you push open in GIS maps, it's called a geospatial informational system. And Lee County, Collier County, all the counties in Florida have this same system. And you can just go around and search and click on all the different properties. So if you know one of them, you could then come down and click two doors down from that and see who owns that, when did they buy it, all of those things. Cards, this looks like this was the blueprint for the house initially. Not all properties have this on their website. Sketches, so here's a general floor plan according to the county. We already looked at the trim notice, which is your estimate. And then we've got history. This shows a little bit more information regarding the taxes. So it's got 2025 all the way down to 2021. Again, not every property has this much detail. This is probably the most detail I've seen on a particular property. But what it looks like is that in 2023, the house was worth about 500,000. However, the seller had homestead on it. See the homestead exemptions? This is the normal homestead and then the additional. You get them on both. And you see how here it says even non-school. The additional homestead doesn't impact the school taxes, the portion of the school taxes. So it looks like it probably sold because then the bill went up. They're showing, okay, we had a sale in 2024. We take away the homestead exemptions. Actually, the sale might have been in 23. Take away the homestead exemption. Here's our new assessed value. And then in 2025, unfortunately, the price probably went down a little bit. So the seller back in 23 was paying $1,700. 2024, it went up to 4,700. In 2025 is now closer to 4,500. It's a pretty neat website, I would say. And then what I'm going to do next is up at the top here. So Kim, if you wanted to, you can do a change of address form right here. I don't know if my screen is showing it, but I clicked the button at the top that says change address. So if you go and meet with this guy and you're saying, "Hey, look at this, you may want to update where we have the tax bills sent." You can do it right there. Very simple. And then there's the tax estimator. So let me see it, make sure I'm still sharing this. Yeah, it looks like I still am. Okay, let me know if it's not the case. So now Kim is selling the house and she gets someone, a buyer who's interested in buying it and says, "Well, I'm going to pay 500 for it. I think I think it's a great house. What will my taxes be?" Well, we can throw the number in, and this is specific to this property, so it can get pretty close. Do you plan on applying for a homestead? Nope, I'm going to make it a secondary home. Okay. Well, approximate taxes are $5,400. The non-ad valorem, which is like the trash pickup, and then so the total will be about 5616. Now, I will tell you, this is probably an overestimate. I would think that the county, even if you paid 500,000, they'll probably assess you at closer to 450. So if let's say we put 450 in there, taxes right around 5 grand. Now, if we go back, let's see if I was right about this. Yeah, look at this. He bought it in 2024 for 430,000. So in 2024, he bought it for 430,000. So the homestead exemption, maybe the seller took out the homestead exemption in 23, like maybe they got rid of it, they bought something else. It eventually sold in January 31st. Kim, you let me know if I'm right about any of this. I have a feeling the original seller probably bought something else, ported their homestead exemption to the new place, and so this one went up without a homestead, and then the new owner took over and reappraised. Let's see what Kim says. Oh, it was remodeled. Okay, so it was remodeled. Great. So now it's ready. So if anyone wants to buy a remodeled house from Kim, give her a call. All right, so that's Collier County. I think it's a great website. There's a lot of information on here. We can even do the GIS maps. This is the same thing if you wanted to search for me. So ultimately, if someone were to question you on, how did you find that? Where is that information? You can find it this way. And you can bring up the website and say, well, this is what I found. It's pretty much right to the source. So here's my house. We're going to zoom out a little bit. Let's say you know my house, or you're like, all right, well, that crazy Christian guy, he wants to buy the lot next door. Who owns that? Well, I don't know the address because it's a vacant lot, but if you go on GIS, I can just click. I can click the parcel and then get more information. And I now know exactly where I need to send my letter to see if that owner would be willing to sell. Fascinating, right? We even know what he paid for it and when. So 2009, he bought it and he's owned it ever since. He owned it for a long time. So, who knows? Maybe he'd be ready. Maybe he'd be ready. Let's see. So we'll see what happens in Collier, see what happens with Christian. But now let's do the same analysis. Let's do it in Lee County. And this applies anywhere. Lee County's looks a little different. Um, let's see if I can go to the main screen for you. And I'll try not to spend too much time on it. So this is your main screen. It's called LEPA, Lee PA, Property Appraiser. .org. Go to database search and search. All right, so here I'm going to go to a property that I was working on. It's a commercial property. It's on Winkler. Let's see what pops up. And sometimes you don't need everything. You just need to get started. So, all right, we've got all this stuff here. In fact, I do know the address, so I'm going to change this. So if you do know the address, type it in. And it's going to pop up right here. I kind of cheated. I had it already pulled up. So here's the address. Again, you've got your site address, and then you've got a different mailing address. For commercial properties, this would be really normal. It can give you some really good information on like, okay, I need to know who really owns this company. So who lives at this property, so on and so forth. Go down, we've got a lot of different tabs. So in Collier County, the tabs are on top and they go horizontal. Here they're more vertical, but they do the exact same thing. So here's the sales tab. This will tell you all the transactions. They may not technically be sales, but all the recorded deeds, all the change of ownership, going back to 1988. The nice thing about this property is Lee County also has a quick link to the deed. So you've got your warranty deed here. Now, this is what's called a special warranty deed. And I do have this question a lot. What's the difference between a special warranty deed and a general warranty deed or, something else or a statutory warranty deed? Special warranty deed is similar to like a limited warranty deed where they change the warranties. So you've got your general or statutory that has all the best warranties. The seller will warrant this property that I own it forever. And then a limited or special warranty says, well, we'll do that except this, this, and this. We're going to limit some of our warranties. For example, the reason they do that, and let me see if I can share, is this part right here. Subject to taxes, subsequent years, which is normal, and those matters set forth in section B. Let me show you what that looks like. This is section A, here's section B. So this is really common for commercial properties where we're saying, all right, we're warranting title except for these things. Easements, encroachments, utility easements, annexation agreements, and any other sort of there. I think on this one there was like an access easement so that they could actually get onto the property because they're next door to each other. If we go back to the property, I think the interesting part here is this. This is your GIS system. It's very similar to Collier County. This has a couple of different buttons. I think they use a different vendor. But this one's pretty sharp. You can zoom in and around. You can get a good idea of what this property looks like. And then you can also, because it's commercial, it was really helpful to know, who owns this property here. Let's see. Who owns this? What's going on there? And that's actually the connector. The county or the city owns that. And they've actually proposed that they're going to be putting in a thoroughfare right there, going all the way down to the property. So really very interesting. You can do the same thing with permits and all of that. So I think that's a really good trick. I think you should always be pulling the deed, whether you're the listing agent going for a listing appointment, making sure that you have everything done correctly, or if you're the buyer's agent wanting to make an offer and you don't want to rely entirely on what the listing agent tells you, you want to make sure that you get it correct. You have a copy of the deed, you kind of know the details. Is it in an LLC? Is it in a trust? And how would we set all of that up? All right, so I quickly want to go to my next favorite section, and I'm saying that sarcastically, permits. Okay, so I've done videos on permits, I've done articles on it. They are really, really frustrating. However, it's necessary. It's just something that we have to deal with. The first thing you need to know is that permits are an inspection issue. They are not a title issue. So I can always do a closing even if there are 1,000 open permits. They don't bother me for title purposes. However, we all know buyers worry about permits. They don't want a bunch of open or expired permits. They don't want any liability on those permits. So we're going to be verifying that stuff. And importantly, from a seller's perspective, you don't want to be in a time crunch. You don't want to lose a buyer or have unnecessary urgency if you could deal with this ahead of time. So there are a couple of websites that do a really great job here. I would say the two that I like the best are Collier County and Marco Island because you don't need to log in. I love that. Collier County, I think you have to do like a CAPTCHA. You have to make sure that you're a human being, but you do not need to log in, which is great. So here, what you'll do is you'll just click to search permits. You'll put in an address. In this case, that's what I did. I put in the address and I clicked a particular permit. And what it shows me is the application status. Let me see if I can annotate. So application status, in this case, the inspections have been completed. Now that's important for two reasons. One, the seller can kind of breathe easy. We're past inspections. We just need, maybe there's a paperwork issue. Maybe they have a fee that is owed. So go in person, get it resolved. So if you're the listing agent, you're gonna go talk to your seller and say, look, you're almost there. Inspections are complete. Go down to the permit office, ask them what else is needed, and see if they can just close it for you. That's hugely powerful. And again, you'll look like a superhero. And I tell that to anyone that we do this together with. I'll tell the realtor, I say, you will look like a superhero if you go down and just deal with it. They are going to feel like they're not paying you enough. And that's huge. Um, it also could be hugely frustrating because sometimes the permit just can't be closed, that it needs to, something else needs to happen. So in this case, the permit had expired, which is frustrating, and it was in a contractor's name. Now, the good thing is this contractor's still in business and is recent enough that they should be willing to handle this. Now, ideally, if it was like 6 months ago, you call the contractor and say, "Hey, that permit's still open and I'm selling. I need you to work on this." You just don't want to have to do that when you've got 2 weeks till closing. Don't wait that long. Now, the other nice thing is this isn't just for listing agents. I would say any buyer's agent should be doing the same thing. So we go into the property, we look up the Collier County permits and we say, all right, what have they done? Let's say there are a couple scenarios. One, they're promoting that the kitchen has been completely renovated and they spent $100,000 on it. And you go on here and there are no permits that have been pulled. Say, so now you're going to guide your client and say, look, let's definitely go see it. It looks like a, really nice house. We need some information. However, note that it looks like no permits were pulled. And so we're going to have to be very careful about that. Um, it's kind of a big thing. If you didn't know that, you walk in and then it's going to like you're not going to find out until you've already spent money on inspections, you've already kind of emotionally invested, and then you realize, oh my gosh, there were no permits. Why didn't they tell me? Why has this not been disclosed? What does this mean? And oh my gosh, we need to be so worried. Unnecessary, hopefully, if you can nip it in the bud ahead of time. You can say, hey, look, just so you know, there are no permits pulled for this kitchen. So if you still want to move forward, we got to include that in our offer, that maybe the seller takes care of it, or we're gonna kind of give you a lower price because they didn't permit any of this. And then the seller has the decision to make. Do we want to do a permit after the fact, or do we want to just give them a lower price? Whatever works. Now, let me show my screen one more time. There's a lot more information that's on here. So you've got the inspection, so you can even see who did the inspections, and you could call them, you could email them, you could follow through. What are the status? So that in this case, they wanted an inspection affidavit that was filed back in 2019. Let's see what the county means by that. What's the form? Um, they actually gave us information on this one. The EC condition can be resolved by submitting a pool exemption letter. So what I did is I called the pool company and said, hey, I need a pool exemption letter. And I actually went on, I just Googled Collier County pool exemption letter. And I think they have an example that I had to download. I just downloaded the example. Maybe it was the second one. Yeah. Yeah, this was not, I don't think that was the exact one, but they had a letter that we could just borrow, which was really cool. And again, made us look like superheroes. We're not superheroes, but if you just try and you know the websites to go to, you can do that. I also said Marco Island has a great website, and that's because you can find not only the permits, but you can find elevation certificates. So elevation certificates usually come with your survey. And so it tells you base flood elevation. So this is what FEMA has indicated is the base flood elevation. And the elevation certificate will tell you, well, where is your house built in relation to the base flood elevation? Are you just under it? Are you at it? Are you a foot above it? Are you 10 feet above it? Obviously, the higher the house is, the less you worry about what the base flood elevation is. But if the closer you are to this, the more you worry, the more your insurance might cost, the more likely you are that it could have some flooding. And the lower you go, the more extreme that becomes. So if we looked at some of the homes that were really damaged by floodwaters, it's usually because they were a foot or more below the base flood elevation. It's really that simple. They do change those base flood elevations all the time, but again, the cool thing is Send me the base flood elevation. Send me the survey. Send me the elevation certificate. I want to take a look at it. I want to see what's available. And Marco Island does a really great job with that stuff. Let me see if I can share this, and I'll show you the Marco Island. And so every county has that, but they have a different portal, different website, a different way that you access this information. So we will go again to the portal, and all you have to do is put in an address. And you'll be amazed at what you find here. So on the left, you can search just for permits, just for inspections, codes, all that stuff. So we look, we had, I think this was, that's 2016. So I want just permits. We had like an HVAC, we had a roof. Let's see. Oh, here's a screen enclosure. And it shows when they applied, when it was issued, and when it was finalized. So when I'm looking at this property, if you were going to sell it or if someone was going to buy it from me, they would go on here and say, oh, well, okay, you've got, it's on septic, that was closed. It's got a screen pool cage. Here's who did it. Here's when they did it. It's a 20-year-old pool cage, or, the roof is 3 years old. Irrigation, accordion panels. So now you've got your storm shutters, all that, all closed, closed, closed. What's open, what's not open. Again, this is really cool, really good information. I love it. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So my big pitch to you guys is do use this. Have a whole screen of your bookmarks. Have them saved. If you want mine, just email me. I'll share you exactly which ones I log into. So Collier County is a really great one. If you do a lot of work on Marco, there's that one. City of Naples, you just need to create a login and then you'll always be able to access it. Fort Myers, City of Fort Myers, they have their own process. You need a login and then you'll be able to access it. So same thing with permits, or that is the permits. And then you've got your assessor, the appraiser websites. The only other thing we didn't look at was taxes for the tax bill. So you've got your assessor, which determines what the value of the property is, and then the tax collector actually sends and collects the bill. And so there's a separate website for that. There are some neat tools on there, but it's nothing too crazy. I will show you this. Collier Tax Collector. And I'm going to share my screen one last time. Or not. Doesn't want me to. All right, so this is colliertaxcollector.com. Now, I think this is a great website because you can determine if your seller is behind on taxes. So we can do a tax search. And this is where I hope I've paid my taxes. So we're going to look up address. Fingers crossed. 2025. Oh my gosh, I haven't paid it yet. It must have just come out. So luckily 24 and 23, they've all been paid. So in this case, we've got our tax bills. If I paid it in November, it's that number. If I wait a month, if I wait 2 months, 3 months, and then if I wait all the way to March, it's 4% higher. So you get a 4% discount if you pay it in November. That's what my lender will ultimately do, hopefully. You can also, this is a very cool feature, you can get the bills by email. So all you have to do is input your email information and say, I want to receive a paper bill in addition to. So that's what we will do. And I am the owner of this property. Continue. All right, so now they've sent me an email and I'll have to click the link. See, this was helpful for me. If you haven't done that, or if you want to suggest that you do that to your customers, I think that is a really cool idea. A little embarrassing that I hadn't done it. But these things are great. They're really good tools. They have fraud alerts as well. So if you put in your name or your address, it'll alert you if anything's recorded against those two things. very helpful. I think they're really neat features, and I hope you guys are using them. And I hope that if you're not using them, you will start, and that you can also share it with your customers. So it feels like you're continuing to stay in touch with them. You've got something to talk to them about. So I wish you luck. I am seeing a lot of deals out there. You know, we've got holidays coming up soon, so I'm sure things will slow down a little bit just based on that. There's just a normal ebb and flow, but I hope that you have, aggressive buyers. I hope you have aggressive sellers and that you guys act while there's something to act with. And so use this information to be really great at what you do. And if you want me to explain it again, or if you want to look at any of the previous videos, just reach out. I'd be happy to help you. I wish you guys luck. Have a great day.